Hey everyone, Metagrocery here, and welcome to the video review for Transformers Robots in Disguise Starscream. Now, for me, this was actually a rather hard figure to track down. I have been to about 8 or 9 different stores around San Jose, which is, of course, the city I live in currently, and I have been able to find about 5 or 6 Sky Warps, but I have not been able to find a Starscream until now. But I liked the mold, but I told myself I wasn't going to buy a Sky Warp, I wanted to buy a Starscream. So here we have Starscream, and you can tell based on just his appearance that he has kind of a more... His appearance is kind of more inspired by his Transformers animated counterpart, as well as a little bit of his Transformers Cybertron or Armada counterpart, especially more with the vehicle. You can definitely tell in the vehicle it definitely has some more Transformers animated vibes to it. But we have a nice picture of Starscream up on the front of the box. Nice little figure there. A nice little art piece. We see Starscream right in his robot mode with his two null ray guns, which, if you're not familiar with Transformers lore, are basically lasers that make other Transformers dizzy. We see he's a warrior class, which is, of course, identical to the deluxe class. It's just that Robots in Disguise calls it something different. And we, of course, on the back we have instructions as well as pictures of both his robot and vehicle mode. And for some reason, his guns are being held in his hands in this particular picture. As you can see, he is clearly holding his null rays in both of his hands. But as we're going to see, he actually can hold them on his wrists. Here we have Starscream in his robot mode, and having done a few The Last Night videos in a row, I've kind of forgotten how much lighter, and not necessarily low quality, but just how physically lighter and how differently the art style for the Robots in Disguise figures can be. It's not that they feel cheap or flimsy, it's just that they're very light, and they're not necessarily hollow, but they have more compaction. They have more more parts of them that fold into each other. I've kind of forgot about that since it's been a few videos since I've looked at a Robots in Disguise Transformer. But here we have Starscream. Starscream has some interesting joints. For one, he of course has the standard ball joint in the hip, as well as a swivel at the very top of his hip. He has very nice knee articulation, capable of getting well over 90 degrees. And he has just a little bit of an ankle swivel forward and backward, though that's mostly for the transformation. For his head, he does have a swivel, allowing him to look left and right, though it is a little cut off, both due to his collar, as well as he has a fairly large chin. I think if either he didn't have the collar, or if his chin were a little smaller, that would give him a fair bit more posability in the head. Because a ball joint isn't required, I think. I think the swivel is fine, but that cuts part of his articulation off. His shoulders do articulate. There is a swivel at the base of the shoulder, and then a swivel inside his rather comically large shoulder pads. But you're going to have some trouble getting it to angle properly due to his wings. But just for the record, he does have the swivel there. Does have an inward-outward swivel. Ball joint at the shoulder. My ball joints on both, elbow. Both of my ball joints on both elbows are very tight. Maybe that's a good thing. Then he technically does have a little bit of a wrist swivel. It swivels down, though that is mostly for the transformation, so you can fold it into his forearm. But technically it does swivel, so if he had a sword, he can get some cool fencing poses. And, of course, like I mentioned a little bit before, on the back you have this backpack. The backpack, of course, has the articulation of the wings. You can fold them down like that for kind of a more cape like a Starscream cape. You can try to fold them up a little bit to give him a little bit more of that G1, coronation Starscream. Or if you really want, you can just fold them up like that to give him a really silly look that basically just makes him look like he has humongous shoulders, but at least he has wings. Personally, I kind of like them to be somewhat flush with the shoulder pads like that. I know it's not perfect, but that's how I preferred mine. However you choose to have yours is up to you. His two accessories are his null ray guns, which have a little bit of molding on them. Let me see if I can get it to focus there. It's black on black basically, though their handles are painted blue, though likely as a hint to where they're supposed to go, because even though Starscream can, like it shows on the packaging, hold them in his hand, I mean they are 5mm pegs after all, he also has, as you can see, peg holes on his wrists, allowing you to mount them there, and that's probably why the handles are blue, so you'll recognize that, oh hey look, you can put them either on his wrists, which he has in the show, or in his hands. Personally, I like the idea of the wrist cannons. To me, that opens up his hands for other weapons. Plus, it matches with the Decepticon look. I mean, Megatron has the arm cannon, Shockwave has an arm cannon, Starscream has arm cannons. Soundwave doesn't have an arm cannon, but, Soundwave is better than them. Well, for comparison, we have, of course, Starscream, but I'm going to compare him, of course, to Windblade, who is yet another jet. And as you can see, Starscream is maybe about, maybe about 1/3 of an inch taller. It's just barely taller. Actually, about as wide, though, given the way her wings fold down and his fold up, or vice versa. They're about the same width. Here he is next to Grimlock, yet another deluxe class figure from Transformers Robots in Disguise, and he is significantly taller than Grimlock. Not like ridiculously, but he's about half a head taller than Grimlock. The deluxe class or warrior class figure of Grimlock, while being a very nice figure, is rather undersized. So not a good scale, but it's a good side-by-side comparison. Last but not least, just for fun, here he is next to a Tactics Starscream. Now, I realize that most of my viewers might not recognize what the heck this is, but this is an Tactics figure, specifically the one for Starscream, based off of his counterpart from Transformers Cybertron. It was made in 2006, so I have had this figure for a little over 10 years. And for the longest time, this was my only Starscream figure, but I can't say that now. But, I just thought it'd be fun, since I mentioned the other types of Starscreams. I thought it might be fun just to have a side-by-side comparison of the relatively new Starscream with the Starscream I grew up with. Here is Starscream, this time in his jet mode. Starscream resembles a kind of a futuristic-looking jet, though definitely kind of more of an American jet fighter based on the curve of the wings. As you can clearly see, his feet unconvincingly transform into jet thrusters, but what's really interesting is because the legs collapse similarly to Windblade's, it folds up very nicely into a nice compact little jet mode. And because of how the backpack works, he actually covered some of that backpack cable actually covers up some of his robot parts. So basically, the only thing you can really see, I mean, if you didn't know this was a robot, the only thing you'd be able to see that looks even vaguely robotish is that there are basically what look like two arms kind of hanging off the sides with visible hands. But if you're looking at it from front on or from the side, you can't tell this. You wouldn't be able to tell this is a robot. You'd just think it was a pretty thick jet. One thing I'm really surprised by is that these wings don't tab into the shoulders. They just kind of, they tab in to basically the sides of the legs, albeit a little loosely. This is a very interesting jet mode, though definitely not a bad jet mode, just different than I'm used to. The null ray guns tab into the underside of the wings, which, by the way, is usable weapon storage in robot mode if you don't want to have the guns either on his wrists or in his hands. If you for some reason want to just have Starscream be unarmed. So you can plug them here on the wings, and that actually looks rather nice. Or if you want, you can tab them back here on the wrists to have them stored there if you really want to. Personally, I kind of wish that they had given it more steps, because the 9 steps they show aren't very clear. There was a lot of stuff I had to try to figure out just from staring vaguely at the pictures. Like, for example, it wasn't obvious to me that you had to rotate the ball joints and then angle it to get to snap in to the backpack piece. That just isn't very intuitive, even for me, who's been playing with Transformers for like 12 or 13 years. Yeah, very nice robot mode. Something that is a little funny is this nose cone piece. You can see there's a, not a crack, but definitely a seam in the windshield. This whole piece here is basically just a shell that pops up, and peekaboo! There's Starscream. All of this, there's a shell piece here, and then basically everything from the end of the windshield down is just nose cone. So that's a little amusing, but it does the job very well. I like this figure. I'm not going to display it in vehicle mode, but it's definitely nice. I'm going to put it next to my my Voyager Megatron from the last night, and my Voyager Shockwave from Dark of the Moon. I think this is a very nice iteration of Starscream. For comparison, of course, here is the Warrior class Starscream, aka a deluxe class, compared to one of my favorite figures ever, Transformer Cybertron deluxe class Sideswipe, and you can see that they're definitely about the same size, except instead of having swords as his wings, Starscream has actual wings. Of course, and Sideswipe is a Planet X jet or stealth bomber. If you want to see my fan theory on the secret lost cyberplanet key for Planet X, check out the link in the description. It was a really fun video that I enjoyed making because I get to talk about Sideswipe, who's one of my favorite figures, and I got to talk about Soundwave. Here he is next to Voyager class Starscream, Thundercracker from the 2007 Transformers movie. He technically he is Thundercracker, but he is a repaint and technically a remold, since the head is a different mold, but he's for the most part, he's a repaint of 2007's Starscream. So there we go. Starscream can ride on top of Thundercracker, like he's getting a little piggyback ride. Surprisingly, the actual jet mode isn't that much smaller, but that's mostly because Thundercracker has his legs and his arms down there. For the most part, his actual plane pieces are mostly just his torso. Not one of my favorite figures, but it's a fairly classic figure for me when comparing Voyagers to each other. I just thought it'd be fun, considering Thundercracker is a repaint of Starscream. And last but not least, for a little bit of continuity, here he is again with 2006 A Tactics Starscream. I will be doing a video on what remains of my Tactics collection, so if you want to see a piece of Hasbro history, subscribe or leave me a comment asking about Tactics, because I would really love to do a video. It was something I was really into when I was a bit younger, and I'd love to share some history of Tactics with all of you. Anyways, thank you all for watching. This has been a Metagross Freak video on Transformers Robots in Disguise. It's Warrior Class Starscream. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care. What? Megatron forgot to cover his cough. I, Starscream, am the leader of the Decepticons. Poop.